Imagine a system where the same structures that cause harm also claim to be the ones fixing it, where inequality is addressed but never truly challenged, where poverty is managed but never eliminated, where social change becomes a brand, and justice a fundraising strategy. That's the world we live in, and it has a name: the non-profit industrial complex. We're taught to believe that non-profits are the solution to injustice. They provide food, shelter, education, healthcare, and they do. But beneath that surface is a more uncomfortable truth. Some of these organizations, even with the best intentions, are part of a system that profits off of inequality while helping just enough to keep the status quo intact. The non-profit industrial complex refers to the entangled relationship between non-profit organizations, wealthy donors, foundations, and the government. A network that, intentionally or not, limits the kind of change non-profits are allowed to fight for. It's a phrase that comes from grassroots organizers and scholars, especially women of color, who saw firsthand how traditional non-profits often co-opted movements, turning radical demands into polite proposals, and revolutionary work into annual reports. Here's how it works. Imagine you're an activist fighting to end systemic racism in housing. You organize protests, demand rent caps, expose slumlords, and call out politicians. But once your movement gains attention, here come the grants, the foundations, the big donors. But those donors, they don't want disruption. They want metrics, deliverables, board meetings. Suddenly, you're applying for funding that requires you to replace your bold demands with safe language. You go from abolish evictions to increase access to housing, from dismantle white supremacy to promote diversity. Your message gets softened. Your fire gets filtered, and slowly, without realizing it, your movement becomes a non-profit. It's still helping people, but now it's operating on terms that protect the very system you are trying to fight. Non-profits often rely on wealthy donors and foundations for funding, and those funders have priorities. They may want their names on buildings, tax write-offs, photo ops, or control over how the money is used. They rarely fund radical change, because radical change threatens their wealth. So the result? The groups with the most money are often the ones least willing to challenge the system. And the groups that are doing the boldest, most transformative work? They're underfunded, under-resourced, and sometimes actively pushed aside. This isn't a conspiracy. It's a design. The non-profit industrial complex allows society to appear like it's addressing injustice, while keeping power exactly where it is. Instead of redistribution, we get charity. Instead of systemic change, we get symbolic programs. Instead of listening to those most affected, we give microphones to non-profit executives, many of whom don't come from the communities they serve. When communities rely on non-profit funding to survive, they also become dependent on the rules of that system. And those rules often say, don't be too radical, don't name names, don't disrupt donors, be grateful for the help, and don't ask why it's needed in the first place. This isn't to say that all non-profits are bad. Many do life-saving work. Many are run by passionate, justice-minded people. But the structure they operate within, the non-profit industrial complex, often rewards stability over transformation and compliance over confrontation. On social media, this gets even murkier. We see perfectly curated posts from non-profits, inspirational quotes, success stories, fundraising drives. But we rarely see the contradictions. The executive directors earning 6 figures while their staff qualify for food stamps. the donor galas that cost more than the programs they support, the big grants that come with strings attached and silence required. Online, non-profits can build powerful brands around causes, but not always the kind of pressure that challenges systems. What happens when activism becomes a 501c3? What do we lose when liberation becomes a grant proposal? We lose urgency, we lose clarity, we lose control. When movements are pulled into the non-profit world, they often become more palatable, more professional, and less political. Strategies that once centered direct action and collective power shift toward branding, fundraising, and awareness campaigns. Awareness becomes the product. Change becomes the pitch. And the communities most affected are turned into content. Their stories curated to appeal to donors who may never experience the injustice firsthand. This isn't accidental. It's how the non-profit industrial complex sustains itself. In many ways, it mirrors the same inequalities it claims to fight. The people with the most power inside non-profits are often furthest from the problem. White, wealthy, institutionally educated. Meanwhile, the people doing the most emotionally and physically taxing work, organizers, outreach workers, case managers, are underpaid, overworked, and disposable. When leadership doesn't reflect the community, priorities shift. Budgets go to marketing before mutual aid. Professional development before housing stipends. Donor relationships before political education. And when harm happens inside these organizations, racism, exploitation, burnout, there's rarely accountability. Because non-profits aren't accountable to the people they serve. They're accountable to the funders. That's the core contradiction. It shows up in metrics too. Non-profits are often required to prove impact through reports, KPIs, and success stories, framed to please outsiders. That means real progress, like empowering people to organize, gets overlooked if it can't be graphed or quoted. So instead of building long-term solutions, many non-profits focus on short-term deliverables that look good on grant applications. It's not the fault of the people inside these orgs. It's the system they're in. A system where philanthropy is praised as generosity, not restitution. Where billionaires get credit for donating fractions of fortunes they built on exploitation, while still shaping public policy through their foundations. And while non-profits do important harm reduction work, harm reduction isn't justice. Feeding people is vital, but who created the hunger? Providing shelter is necessary, but who profits from the crisis? When we only treat symptoms, we forget to question the disease. Movements become non-profit campaigns. Radical ideas become donations, and the hope of transformation gets replaced by temporary programs. The non-profit industrial complex gives the illusion of progress without threatening the system's foundation. It channels rage into paperwork. It absorbs resistance, institutionalizes it, and neutralizes it. On social media, this all looks good. Slick graphics, branded hashtags, professional photo ops. But what's missing is power. Because power doesn't come from branding. It comes from organizing. And real organizing often exists outside the non-profit system. It's messy, it's risky, it's local, it's undocumented, unfunded, and unfiltered. It looks like neighbors forming mutual aid networks. It looks like people disrupting city meetings. It looks like collectives that refuse grant money because they won't compromise. These efforts don't go viral. They don't host galas or create branded toolkits. But they build power, not just programs. And they push us to think beyond charity and ask, what does real justice look like? It doesn't look like giving back. It looks like giving up control. It looks like redistributing resources without conditions. The non-profit industrial complex survives because it masks harm with service. Because it teaches us to be grateful for the crumbs instead of demanding the feast. Because it convinces us that change is a job, not a right. But justice doesn't require a 501c3. It requires courage. It requires imagination.